Hi, welcome to the Community Impact Chronicles. Tonight we're going to be discussing with Alyson Parham, the CEO of the Partec Consulting Group, her views on what's happening with nonprofits in 2024 and what her organization is doing to help nonprofits achieve their dreams. So I'm going to bring Alyson in and we'll get this conversation started. Alyson, how are you doing?
Hey, great, Mark.
All right. You know what I like to do when people first come on the show? I like to have them introduce themselves and tell me who they are, what their superpower is, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, let's see. Well, the second question will be a little bit more challenging because I'm still pondering my superpower. But the first one, I'm Alyson Parham
Small. That's right. I got it correct. I just realized I said
Parham. My own brother keeps forgetting that I've been married now for 10 years.
10 years. Okay.
Yes. So let's see. So for the past 29 years, I've operated my own consulting firm, Partec Consulting Group. Started it way back when. Started out really doing a lot of small business consulting and then shifted to do more work with nonprofits, foundations, government, and other intermediaries. And in addition to my for-profit consulting firm, I also am the founder of Sustainable Connections International, which is a nonprofit organization that works to support vulnerable children in Ghana and in Indianapolis. Anything else? I have a wonderful husband, 2 children.
All right. So tell me this. Apparently, because of your nonprofit and even your for-profit, it's all about the community. It seems like it always, I mean, you know, so the big question a lot of times people ask, well, why?
You know, it's a great question. I remember when I first got out of college and I was working for an urban league and didn't really know what I was doing, but I loved the idea that I was trying to make a difference in the community. And from there, even though I went on to a consulting firm that worked with a variety of types of organizations, I think it was the fact that, you know, communities and particularly communities of color are often so challenged and under-resourced. And to me, I think I wanted to apply my gifts and talents to make a difference there. I wasn't, quite frankly, as motivated about helping companies to make more money as I was in terms of helping organizations that ultimately wanted to see change in community. And so that's kind of the space that I've been in all these years.
So let's talk about Partec, okay? And how long has that organization been around and what's its purpose? Or, you know, I guess when people write their vision, what's your vision and mission, you know, for Partec?
Well, so Partec Consulting Group, you know, our mission is to really to help our clients advance their missions to achieve change in community. And we do that by providing consulting, training, coaching services to not only nonprofits, but to organizations, foundations, and other intermediaries that support nonprofits through their grant making. And so over the years, I've been fortunate to work in communities all across the United States, either working directly to help impact nonprofits or communities themselves. And so it's the space that we've operated in. I think we've been around for 29 years, so we're doing something right. But I think it's our passion to be able to affect change on those that are committed to change in community that keeps us motivated and keeps us looking for innovative ways in which we can support those who are on the ground doing the work.
I tell you what, when I was going through your site doing a little research, I noticed that you have a focus on Indianapolis. So explain to me what's going on there that's taking your attention right now.
Yes, this is a great partnership that we formed with the Indianapolis Foundation. And this was under the vision of Pam Ross, who is a vice president there and has continued on with the president, Lorenzo Esters. And it really was about their commitment to helping to support grassroots organizations, typically BIPOC, which is Black and Indigenous people of color led organizations, recognizing that they typically are ground zero working in communities and some of our most under-resourced communities in Indianapolis. And so we designed and are currently implementing an infrastructure development initiative that supports the growth and development of BIPOC-led organizations throughout Indianapolis. And we've been just fortunate that it's a learning journey where we've had the opportunity to try out different techniques in terms of how we reach organizations that have a desire to grow. And we continue to learn. I don't think that there's any one answer to this work, but it's work that it takes time to see the return on the investment. And we're just excited to have the opportunity to partner with the foundation on this.
Let me ask you this. Use the word infrastructure development. It's the same thing. You hear the term capacity building. Are we talking about the same thing?
We are in a way. Over the years, I used to always use the term capacity building, but what I found is that oftentimes the term capacity building was linked to someone, potentially a funder, determining that an organization had a deficit in some area. And therefore, the term capacity building was meant to go in and address that deficit. And it was often associated with organizations of color. And so for me, because of the negative connotation associated with that term, we wanted to flip the script and to say that this is really about supporting and investing in the infrastructure of these organizations. And so we do view it as an investment. And so we use the term infrastructure development to support, to reflect our commitment to helping to build the internal infrastructure that supports the work of the organization.
So tell me this. If you're doing this, why do you think your approach works with smaller organizations versus, there's a lot of approaches. A lot of people that work with nonprofits, they do nonprofit consulting. Why do you feel that your approach to working with these grassroots organizations is good?
Well, one, I will say this is not the first time we have been in this space. I mean, we have been in this space for over 20 years, working with different organizations across the country that have implemented some level of infrastructure development. But I think what kind of sets us apart from other individuals is that there's some intentionality in how we approach this work. We recognize that even though organizations may not have, evidence-based curriculums or have certain certifications behind their name, many of the folks that we are working with are on the ground, and they're the first ones in when there is a situation in a home, in a community. And they often go unrecognized for their work. And so I think part of it for us is to recognize that we're not coming in to work with organizations as if we are the technical experts in the work that they do. Um, our expertise is supporting the work, the mission of the organization, and helping to strengthen the infrastructure so that if the organization desires to scale, they can do so. And the way we do that is intentionality among relative to the team. And so what you will find is that most of the consultants on our team are people who have been either former executive directors of nonprofits, foundations, have been in the consulting space from anywhere from 15 to 40 years. And so they're not learning how to do some of this work, they're sharing how to do this work. And so they're eager to depart their knowledge, mix it up with the leaders of these organizations to figure out what works best for that leader. So there's never a standard approach. And we believe that you have to lead with trust. And so we try to make sure that there is a trusting environment between the organizations and the consultants. But we are always in a learning mode. So no matter what we're doing, we give, but at the same time, we're going to learn from the organization, help refine what it is that we do for the next organization.
Let's talk about this term. You keep saying we. Let's talk about your compadres, the people that you're working with. Why are they capable of doing this work?
Well, again, I think it's because they've been on the ground doing this work in different cities. They're all over. We have some right here in Indianapolis, but we have some out of Chicago, out of Atlanta. But the commonality are all of the team members are people who are passionate about helping to move the needle relative to grassroots organizations. And so they give it their all. That this is not simply about money. It is really about the commitment to see change in communities by way of lifting up the organizations we work with.
Outstanding, outstanding. So tell me this, what do you see on the horizon for some of these smaller organizations over the next year or so?
Well, after the combination of COVID and George Floyd, and let's start with George Floyd. After George Floyd, you saw a number of foundations and corporations, everyone kind of reassess their commitment to community and launched a variety of initiatives all over the country, all types of funds to help nonprofits, to help for-profits. And fortunately, in the case of Indianapolis, Indianapolis is very blessed to have a number of funders who understand and are very, very committed to the work. But at the same time, then you had COVID. And so then now all of a sudden you have people who are sheltering in place, and many of the nonprofits that they had turned to for help had closed their doors. But yet these grassroots organizations stepped up to the challenge. And in many instances, they were going door to door, doing what they had to do to make sure people in their communities received the medical care, the food, whatever else they needed. But here we are in 2024, and part of this is while we have been blessed to have significant resources, and this is across the country, some suggest that there will be a slowing down of funds to support the work of nonprofits. You're seeing changes in terms of giving. And so it will become more challenging for smaller nonprofits, but it also is an opportunity for smaller nonprofits at the same time. Challenging because we run the risk that funders who previously may have been supporting work in a particular space may shift and look elsewhere to place their dollars. And as a result, That means all of these organizations now have to find new partners, new funding partners to support their work. Um, for smaller nonprofits, it will mean not being overly reliant upon grant funding, but beginning to look at how they diversify their funding from individual donors. And that has always been more of a challenge, particularly in communities of color for smaller nonprofits. Oftentimes, they just didn't have the mechanism in place to go out and to tell their story. And that's part of the reason why we launched this podcast, is because we believe that if people could hear the stories of people working in the trenches every day in community, but may not have a fancy website to that is calling you in to make donations, that people will start to realize that small doesn't mean inferior. Small could suggest flexible, adaptable to the needs of community. And so 2024 represents an opportunity for growth for those who are committed to continuing to invest in their infrastructure and in telling their story. But at the same time, there is the likelihood that some funding sources that had traditionally made themselves available will shift. So our goal is to make sure organizations remain flexible, nimble, and are responsive to the opportunities that may surface in their respective communities.
Well, since you dropped the bomb already, I'm going to bring it up. So let's talk about this podcast that you're going to be dropping. The purpose of it, why are we doing it, and what do we hope to accomplish with it? Because to me, a lot of times people who have podcasts, they don't really have a mission. They don't. So what's your mission with this podcast?
Well, this is really, again, one of the things that we are finding just in Indianapolis alone, but I've seen this in other communities that I'm working in or have worked in, that oftentimes smaller organizations, no one really knows their full story. Now, there are a few that maybe the media will latch on to and will lift those up. But for the most part, there are organizations that just never, ever get their moment in the spotlight. And so we decided that one of the things that we could do is to create a podcast that amplifies the voice of these organizations that are working on the ground. One, as a learning opportunity for people who are either contemplating starting something similar. And so the Community Impact Chronicles is really designed to lift up small grassroots organizations to share their story and their impact in community. But it also serves as a resource. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we have a team of consultants who are very dedicated to supporting and advancing grassroots organizations. And so over the years, they just have amassed a wealth of knowledge around tips and tools and strategies for organizations. And so we wanted a space where people could come on and literally share their experiences, their tools, their lessons learned, in hopes that whoever is listening will be inspired to say, I can do that. Or that.
So how do I? So if I have something to say, I can contact you and I can get on your show, or how's that work?
Well, I think part of what we want to do is, again, we want to provide space for organizations that are committed to change in community. Sometimes we find that there are organizations that get committed to making money, which there's nothing wrong with that. But then you have those that are committed to making a difference in the community. And so, people who have a story to be told, they can contact us and someone will follow up to hear their story and to figure out if it meshes with the audience that we're serving. But again, this is really to give space and to show proof positive that these organizations are making a difference in community. They don't necessarily have a workforce of 100 people, but they're powerful. And might I add, oftentimes the founders of these organizations are investing their own dollars. I mean, they are like literally the number one donor, but that story doesn't get told, right? And so we want to kind of balance the playing field with this particular podcast.
All right. So I tell you what, I showed it. How often are you going to do it starting out?
So our goal is to launch with once a month. I think today is a shorter segment because we just wanted to kind of let folks know what's coming. But it'll be the first Tuesday of every month. We've got some exciting folks lined up already to go. And the diversity of the topics and the work that folks are doing, it's not limited to Indianapolis. They're from all over. And what we want to do is create community online through this podcast.
Wow. So I tell you what, I am trying to go to your, so where are they going to be able to see this at?
So it will be available on YouTube. You can go to our website, Community Impact Chronicles. You can go to Partec Consulting Group. There's a link that will take you to Community Impact Chronicles. I'm sure I'm not the one, but I'm sure that it'll show up in our LinkedIn feed and Spotify and all of the common places that podcasts will show up.
Yeah, so
And
this is the YouTube page I'm showing now.
Oh, okay.
So like,
okay.
Yeah. So right now, this is it. So they'll be able to go watch it on YouTube. So I tell you what,
we're also open to folks that have resources, folks that have tools and expertise that they want to share with leaders of nonprofits. So it's not just nonprofits, but if you have something to offer that could be a learning opportunity for folks that are listening, we welcome that as well.
So I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to start wrapping up here. So I'm going to put on a little music here, and I want you to drop a couple pearls of wisdom, to the people before we about getting ready for 2024.
2024. Well, one of the things I would say is, if you think small, you'll stay small. Think big, shoot for it. You can make it. And believe in community. And community doesn't have to be just your geographic area. But reach out. And I think the last thing I would say is be open to learn. We are always in different spaces of learning. And there's always new information to take on. No one person has all of the answers. But I think working together, we can make a difference in our communities.
So I'm going to play your video one more time and we'll end the show. Thanks for all your answers to all the great questions. And so I'm going to play your promo for your show. And everyone, you'll be getting invites to be on the show and to listen to the show. But you can go to YouTube, the Community Impact Chronicles, or just go to partecgroup.com.